Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Connecting. As always, we are very glad that you're watching our content, and we're very thankful that you're finding this meaningful enough to come back. Again, we encourage you to watch till the end. If you find this content useful, we hope you subscribe. And again, even if you don't subscribe today, I'm just glad that you're spending your valuable time with us. Now, for folks who watched the video yesterday, I'll post the link below. I talked about some of the perils that people in diaspora run into when they move into the village, some of the surprises that can come with moving to the village. Now, as I said yesterday, that video was not meant to discourage folks from coming back. We're just keeping it 100%. That sometimes, even though the village is amazing, on occasion some things go wrong. Now, today's video is going to be the exact opposite of what we did yesterday, where I'm going to talk about instances where those of us who are returning are the ones causing problems to folks back at home. I've had lots of stories about the problems that we returnees cause, and I'm going to highlight a few here. And so I'm going to talk about issues that are related to returnees who may be temporary or permanent returnees at the same time. And to do that, I'm going to first of all present the context. And to do that, again, I'm going to split this discussion into two separate sections. The first segment is going to focus on old-timers. And by old-timers, I mean folks who've lived in diaspora for a while, probably 15 plus years. Usually after the 10th year, I don't even think it makes much of a difference. But in my personal life, I've met folks who have been in diaspora for, the oldest person I know has been in diaspora for over 55 years. The second guy has been there for about 52 years. And one of them has never been back to Kenya since he left as a kid. And so old-timers have a slightly different experience in terms of the problems they cause when they come back, compared to the other group that I'm going to call the recent returnees. And that could be anything from a person who just traveled, spent 10 days in diaspora, and then came back, to those who are probably under 2 years living in diaspora. So here's some of the contextual issues that are specific to old-timers. Number one, it is typical that many old-timers are really out of touch with what's happening back at home, including geography, just knowing where things are. Even though Nairobi is still in the same place it was, but if you left Nairobi in 1969, when you come back today, what you'll find is unbelievable. And so old-timers tend to be really out of touch in terms of geography. Language also may be an issue, especially old-timers who left when they were kids. They may have very little of their native languages left. Of course, many of the old-timers are out of touch with the trending issues, topics, people, and things like that. And that actually reminds me of an interesting example about squat toilets. This is a problem for many folks, especially old-timers, who maybe have not used squat toilet for like 20 years. And then they come back and they try it, and maybe some of them have medical issues, arthritis and all that. Then you discover something that is as simple as a squat toilet may be quite complicated to use, in the sense that you squat down there and then you wake up and you realize you have so many muscles you never knew existed on your tail end. Yes, and don't be surprised when you find an old-timer brushing his or her teeth using bottled water. It may sound interesting, but those who know exactly what that is about. And of course, the old-timers have little to no networks back at home. Most of their connections are in diaspora. Because typically what happens is that once people move away from home, their own networks disperse, or as people move on, people don't stay as connected as they were when they lived at home. And so the old-timers typically don't have networks at home, or if they do, it's very tight, small networks. Like I said earlier, with language, it depends on how old a person was at the time they left. People who live as kids most likely lose their language. But if you find an old-timer who left after 18, when they could speak their native tongue and now they claim they can't, Well, that would be interesting because it's very hard to lose a native tongue, especially a language you've spoken for 18 years. Then you come and then you forget it. Some people say they do, but I find it hard to believe. And then, of course, many old timers, when they come back, often feel the pressure to sort of make it rain. You come home and the expectation is that you brought back money. And so people feel like they need to spend in a way that meets the expectations of folks back at home. Another common thing with the old timers, too, is the issue of accent. Their accent are more likely to be slightly further away from our delightful Kenyan traditional twang that we pick up. And for those who are not Kenyans, I also need to clarify that the English we speak in Kenya has British roots, but can be wildly different depending on where a person was born and raised. People who are born and raised next to the mountains, by the coast, by the lake, have very different local variations of the same English. And so while there's Kenglish, or what we call Kenyan English in general, you will hear a variety of accents, just depending on where a person was raised and who their first teacher was. So returnees who are old-timers usually have an accent that is much, much further away from any of the accents that we typically associate with those who are born and raised in Kenya. Now, the issue of cultural norms too is another unique one where old-timers, many of them have actually picked up or are more likely to have picked up cultural norms and values that may be different than what they were raised with, especially things like tipping. And I'm not saying that Kenyans don't tip. Kenyans do tip. It's just that I think it's more common amongst diasporans. Things such as their perceptions of time can be really different. I remember I had a meeting with a person whose name I will not mention in Maseno. We had a scheduled meeting at 1 p.m. So, of course, I show up at 12:30 and I sat there till 5 p.m. And that didn't seem any strange. And so issues of time, some of us may have different perceptions about it, especially after leaving diaspora. Now, I also want to remind you that, yes, in Kenya, there are also folks who are super, super time conscious who have never been to diaspora. So it may not necessarily be a diaspora thing. And then, of course, perceptions about women and problem solving might be really different. Old-timers, too, there's a very specific group of old-timers who have not changed a bit. They've lived in diaspora for a long time, but they really haven't changed. You find a guy who left Nyalgonga 47 years ago, and he looks exactly the same, besides the wear and tear on the physical body. They look exactly the same, talk exactly the same, dress exactly the same. And this is especially common amongst men. I don't know why this happens. Maybe somebody who knows this could explain it better for us in the comments. I don't know. Women tend to adjust much faster than we do. And I don't know why that is the case. And then, of course, the old-timers, their return is often more disruptive compared to folks who've been barely in diaspora. Now, the second group that I describe as sort of like the newbies, folks who've been there for a few days or up to 2 years. Many of them, again, just as you see with the old-timers, feel the pressure to present themselves differently. Like when they come back, they need people to know that they have been somewhere different and they look different. Same thing with the pressure to make people feel like they've made it. That is much more common among folks who've not been long out in the diaspora. And then, of course, a very unique feature is that those who've traveled for a short while often become instant experts on all things diaspora. And so it's not uncommon to find the entire village just drinking from their fountains. So you've heard a person who's come to the US, for example, spends like 10 days in a small town in southern Alabama. When they come back home, you ask them about Alaska, they know it. You ask them about Puerto Rico, they know it. So they often become experts on everything diaspora. And then they're more likely to quote unquote forget their native tongues. Why, I don't know. This is another phenomenon that I don't understand. So if you have a sense as to why that's the case, maybe you can let us know. How somebody would come to the US, for example, spend like a year or so. When they come back, they've forgotten Luo, when Luo is all they've spoken all their lives. I don't understand it, but I've seen those cases. And often these groups are still very much in touch with current trends. They still have very strong networks, and they are culturally very much in sync with the folks who are living in Kenya in terms of their values, mannerisms, and things like that. So often their return is not as disruptive as that of old timers. So here are some of the issues that we've observed amongst these different groups. Number one, we can be overly distrustful, maybe because of past experiences. Sometimes, unfortunately, we often treat people as if all they need is money when folks come to us. And again, these are issues that could be either real or perceived. We can be very alienating. I hear sometimes we use this term, you Kenyans, you Kenyans. And of course, when it comes to purchasing stuff, we often, they say tunaribu bei, meaning we end up spending more than we should on things like land and labor, which messes up the typical cost of things back at home. And then, of course, we can be perceived as competitors for jobs, land, mates, and things like that. In fact, I know of companies that specifically targets Kenyans with international experience, and that may have implications for folks living at home. Then we have this massive group of love swindlers who often use our diaspora strings to really completely wipe out women. And this reminds me of a very beautiful young woman called Beryl Etendi, who talks about all kinds of stories he has had with diaspora men. And of course, we've been accused of talking large. And then more commonly, the holiday spending that we engage in at home often is not typical. When we are back in diaspora, we don't spend as much as we do back at home, which gives people a false sense of what reality looks like. So here's some suggestions of things that I know folks have done that may help mitigate some of these issues. Number one, I say relax. There's no need to be on that constant survival mode once you're home. Trust me, the universe is not after you. And so when I see people calling me, asking me, will I be okay in Kenya because they watched news and there was somebody shot in Mandera? Like, no, it's okay. Just come back home, relax. Learn to do things by yourself. You can get a phone, you can pay for stuff online. You don't have to depend on people to do things for you, like driving. I've seen folks who hire big cars and hire drivers for like an entire month. You don't have to do that. And then also recognize that everybody's time is valuable. So you don't want to come home and then have people shut down their lives running around circles with you, and then you take off leaving them just like that. Don't do that. As much as you can, please blend in. Let me give you an example. I've seen some of us go to church at home in shorts. When we are back in diaspora, we never go to church in shorts. So there are things that are just not necessary. Just keep a low profile as best as you can, because people will know that you're from diaspora one way or the other. So keep a low profile as best as you can. And then whatever language is preferred, wherever you are, use it. So don't walk into a meeting where you have an entire group of older Luo folks and you're busy daring everyone with English. That is not necessary. Use what is preferred in any particular context where you are. As far as accent is concerned, I really don't have any advice on this. I'd like to hear folks' thoughts on that. But my position is, do you? The world will adjust. If somebody has a different thought, I'd be happy to hear how you respond to that. And then regarding cultural norms, if you picked up something that is different or not considered African, we ask you to be patient. You realize you are in Africa. You are not in Europe, you're not in America. So don't expect America to exist inside Africa. So be patient with folks. And then, of course, when you're talking about controversial things, again, the responsibility is on you to be tactful about how you talk about some of these issues. When you talk about sensitive things like gay marriage and all the other controversial stuff, be tactful. And then lastly, you are not an expert on everything. It doesn't matter how much you know. It's okay to say, I don't know, and just leave it at that. Well, thank you so much for being with us again, and I'll see you in the next. Bye.